Ma'am, keep your hands where we can see them, right now. The voice cut through the night air like a switch being flipped, sharp, controlled, and used to being obeyed. Red and blue lights pulsed across the windshield, painting the inside of Naomi Carter's car in restless color, reflections sliding over her face, her hands, the worn leather of the steering wheel. 10 police vehicles. She counted them without turning her head. 10. The hum of engines, the faint crackle of radios, the synchronized stillness of authority closing in. Naomi exhaled slowly, her breath fogging the glass for just a second before disappearing. She didn't reach for the door handle. She didn't panic. Her fingers rested lightly at the top of the wheel, steady, deliberate, as if she were finishing the last mile of a long shift instead of sitting at the center of a storm. 14 hours in a hospital under fluorescent lights had taught her how to move through pressure without breaking, how to listen beneath noise, how to stay present when everything around her sped up. The faint scent of antiseptic still clung to her sleeves, mixed now with the cool night air slipping in through a barely cracked window. Outside, silhouettes shifted. Boots on pavement. Flashlights angled but not yet intrusive, beams grazing the edges of her car instead of piercing it. Controlled. Measured. Watching. Naomi's eyes flicked once to the rearview mirror. Not to the officers. To herself. For a brief second, she saw more than her reflection. She saw memory layered beneath it. Late nights, quiet grief, a voice she hadn't heard in years echoing somewhere just out of reach. Her thumb brushed against the thin bracelet on her wrist, the metal cool, familiar, grounding. A second command came, louder this time, edged with impatience. Step out of the vehicle. Naomi didn't move. Not out of defiance. Not out of fear. Out of certainty. The kind that doesn't shout, doesn't rush, doesn't need permission to exist. Her gaze lowered to the center console where her phone rested, dark screen reflecting the flicker of lights like distant fire. She let the silence stretch. Not long enough to escalate. Just long enough to settle. Around her, the night seemed to tighten, as if the air itself were waiting to see which direction this moment would take. Somewhere in the distance, a car passed on the highway, its sound fading quickly, indifferent to what was happening here. Naomi inhaled again, slower this time, deeper, anchoring herself in the present. Then, with calm precision, she lifted one hand from the wheel. Not sudden, not hesitant, intentional. Her fingers closed around the phone, the motion small but unmistakable. Outside, one of the officers shifted stance, attention sharpening. Naomi didn't look at them. She looked straight ahead, through the windshield, past the lights, past the presence pressing in from all sides. Her voice, when it came, was quiet. Not weak, not trembling, just clear. Before I do anything, she said, her thumb hovering over the screen, I'm making one call. The phone remained in her hand, the screen still dark for a fraction of a second that felt longer than it should have, as if even time itself was hesitating, watching her choice unfold, and Naomi Carter did not rush it. She let her thumb rest lightly along the edge, feeling the familiar shape, grounding herself in something small and certain while the world outside her car waited for movement, for compliance, for anything they could interpret and respond to. But she offered none of it yet, only stillness, only control, and across the hood of her car a beam of white light shifted slightly higher, catching the curve of the windshield, sliding across her eyes without breaking her focus. While somewhere to her left a radio crackled with low voices speaking in clipped tones that carried authority without warmth. And then another voice cut through again, closer now, firmer. Ma'am, I said, step out of the vehicle. And Naomi could hear the impatience creeping in, not loud, not aggressive, but present, the kind that builds when expectations are not met quickly enough, the kind she had seen before in different rooms, different uniforms, different situations, and she did not react to it. She simply turned the phone over in her hand, the screen lighting up now, casting a soft glow against her palm, illuminating the faint lines of fatigue that 14 hours of work had carved into her skin. And for a brief moment her reflection appeared again in the glass, layered with memory, layered with something deeper than this moment alone, something older, something that had shaped the way she breathed through tension instead of letting it consume her. And her eyes softened just slightly, not with fear, not with hesitation, but with recognition, as if she had stood in a version of this moment before. Not here, not like this, but close enough that her body remembered what her mind did not need to say out loud, and her thumb hovered over a contact she did not need to search for, because it had never been saved under a name, only a number, one she had memorized long ago, one she had hoped she would never need again, and yet here it was, waiting, quiet, patient, like a door that had always been there, whether she chose to open it or not. And outside, one of the officers took a step closer, the sound of his boot pressing against gravel carrying clearly through the thin barrier of glass, followed by a sharper tone. Put the phone down. And this time there was no attempt to soften it, no attempt to negotiate, just instruction, direct and final. But Naomi did not flinch. She did not drop the phone. She did not even look in his direction. Instead, she drew in a slow breath, steady and measured. The kind she had used countless times beside hospital beds when everything depended on calm, when panic helped no one. And then, with that same quiet precision, she tapped the screen, the call beginning with a soft, almost inaudible tone that seemed impossibly small compared to the presence surrounding her. And she lifted the phone to her ear, her posture unchanged, her gaze still forward, her voice when it came low and even, carrying no trace of urgency, only certainty. "This is Naomi Carter," she said, pausing just long enough for the connection on the other end to register, for the line to become real. "I am on Route 17, just past mile marker 42. Another pause, the faint sound of movement outside growing sharper now, attention tightening. "And I need you to activate the protocol." The line did not stay silent for long, and Naomi Carter knew it would not, because numbers like that did not exist without purpose, and purpose did not wait. It responded, a low voice on the other end coming through calm and immediate, not surprised, not confused, just present. "Confirm identity," it said, and Naomi did not hesitate, her eyes still forward, her tone unchanged. "Carter, Naomi Elise. Authorization level 3. And there was a pause, not doubt, not delay, just verification moving faster than anything visible outside her car, faster than the shifting lights, faster than the tightening circle around her. And then the voice returned, slightly lower now, more focused. "Location received, stay on the line." And Naomi lowered the phone just enough to rest it between her shoulder and ear, freeing her hand again to return to the steering wheel, her fingers settling back into place as if nothing had changed, as if everything had. And outside, the energy shifted, subtle but undeniable, one officer stepping closer to her driver's side window, his silhouette now clearer under the flashing lights, his posture firm, controlled, but no longer patient. "Ma'am, this is your final warning. End the call and exit the vehicle." And Naomi finally turned her head, just slightly, enough to acknowledge him without giving away anything else, her expression calm, almost tired, but not defeated, never that. "I am not refusing," she said evenly, her voice carrying through the glass without rising, without challenge. "I am documenting." And the words seemed to land differently than the others had, not louder, not sharper, but heavier, like something that carried meaning beyond the moment. And the officer's stance shifted, just a fraction, a hesitation so small it might have gone unnoticed to anyone else. But Naomi saw it, the same way she saw subtle changes in patience before alarms ever sounded, and behind him, another voice came. Through a radio, louder now, less controlled, asking for confirmation, asking for details that had not mattered before but suddenly did. And Naomi's phone buzzed softly against her ear, the voice returning, this time more direct. "Protocol is live." And Naomi closed her eyes for a brief second, not in relief, not in fear, but in recognition of something set in motion, something that could not be undone once started. And when she opened them again, the world outside her windshield looked the same but felt different, as if the air itself had shifted direction, and one of the patrol car lights flickered slightly before stabilizing, the reflection changing across her dashboard, and another officer stepped back, glancing down at something in his hand, confusion threading through his posture. And then the radio traffic changed, not louder, but sharper, more urgent, names being spoken, unit numbers repeated. And Naomi spoke again into the phone, her voice still low, still steady. "Keep it recording," she said, and the response came immediately. Everything is being logged. And for the first time since the lights had surrounded her, Naomi allowed her shoulders to ease just slightly, not enough to signal anything outward, but enough to mark the difference between waiting and knowing. And outside, Officer Hayes moved into view, his presence unmistakable even before he spoke. His tone controlled but edged now with something new, something that had not been there before. "Who are you talking to?" he asked, not shouted, not demanded, but asked, as if the answer suddenly mattered in a way it had not moments ago. And Naomi met his gaze through the glass, her eyes steady, unflinching, and for a brief second, the space between them felt less like a command and more like a question waiting to be answered. Naomi Carter did not answer immediately, and that silence stretched just long enough to shift the balance again. Because this time it was not hesitation, it was control, and Officer Hayes felt it even if he could not yet name it. His eyes narrowing slightly as he stepped closer to the driver's side window, the reflection of flashing lights cutting across his face in sharp lines. While behind him the coordinated stillness of the other officers began to fracture in small, almost imperceptible ways. One turning his head toward his radio, another lowering his flashlight just an inch. Each movement subtle but connected, like a pattern beginning to break, and Naomi watched it all without moving more than her eyes. The phone still resting against her ear, the quiet voice on the other end still present, still listening, still recording. And when she finally spoke, her tone did not rise to meet Hayes. It remained steady, grounded. "You already know that matters now," she said, and Hayes held her gaze for a second longer than necessary, as if weighing something he could not fully see, before his attention flicked to the officer behind him, who was now speaking more urgently into his radio, repeating Naomi's name, repeating it again as if saying it twice might change what it meant, but it did not. And the air shifted again, tighter, sharper, no longer just a stop, no longer routine. Something else had entered the moment, something none of them had prepared for, and Naomi could feel it the same way she had felt the moment earlier when everything changed without sound. And she adjusted the phone slightly against her ear, her voice lowering just a fraction. "Status," she said, and the response came without delay, precise, controlled. "Live feed confirmed, supervisory units notified, continue as you are." And Naomi nodded once, a small movement, almost invisible, but enough to anchor her, and outside the car, Hayes took a step back this time, not forward, his posture still firm but no longer absolute, his authority still present but now intersected by uncertainty. And he spoke again, but the edge had changed, less command, more calculation. "Ma'am, we need you to step out so we can resolve this." And Naomi turned her head slightly again, not fully, just enough to acknowledge him without yielding the center of the moment. "This is being resolved," she replied, her voice calm, unwavering. And behind Hayes, a radio crackled louder than before, a new voice cutting through, one that carried weight beyond the immediate scene, asking for unit identification, asking for confirmation of engagement, and the officers responded, one by one, their voices no longer as steady as they had been minutes ago, each answer feeding into something larger, something beyond their control. And Naomi listened to it all, the layered sounds, the shifting tones, the quiet unraveling of certainty. And for a brief moment her eyes dropped to the bracelet on her wrist again, her thumb, brushing across it lightly, grounding, remembering, not the fear, not the loss, but the reason she had chosen not to stay silent, not again. And when she looked up, the lights still flashed, the night still held its breath, but the balance had changed, and Hayes felt it, his jaw tightening slightly as he glanced down at his own radio, listening now instead of directing. And Naomi spoke once more into the phone, her voice steady, certain. "Keep tracking," she said, and the reply came just as steady. "We have everything." And in that moment, surrounded by lights, voices, and presence, Naomi Carter remained exactly where she was, not trapped, not powerless, but centered in something none of them could see yet, but all of them were beginning to understand. The night no longer felt still, even though nothing dramatic had happened on the surface, because the shift was not in movement, but in awareness, and Naomi Carter could sense it in the way the officers repositioned themselves, no longer forming a perfect perimeter but adjusting, glancing, recalibrating as information moved faster than their control could keep up, and Officer Hayes stood just outside her window, his presence still firm, but now threaded with something else, something quieter, something closer to caution than command, and his radio came alive again, louder this time. A voice layered with authority cutting through the static, asking for immediate status confirmation, repeating the location, repeating her name again, and Naomi heard it clearly, every syllable landing like a signal that the moment had crossed a line that could not be stepped back from. And Hayes reached for his radio, responding with controlled clarity, but his tone no longer carried the same certainty it had minutes ago. There was a tightness now, a measured restraint, as if every word he chose mattered more than before, and Naomi remained exactly where she was, her posture unchanged, her hands steady, her breathing even. But inside that stillness was something unshakable, something built long before this road, this night, this confrontation, and she listened as the layers of communication stacked over each other, dispatch, supervisors, units identifying themselves one after another, each voice feeding into a system that was now watching from above, from beyond, from places that did not rely on flashing lights or raised voices, and her phone buzzed softly again. The voice on the other end returning with a subtle shift in tone. Supervisory review engaged, it said, and Naomi closed her eyes for just a fraction of a second, not to escape, but to center, to acknowledge that the process she had helped design was now fully active, not theoretical, not planned, but real, unfolding around her in real time. And when she opened her eyes, Officer Hayes was no longer looking directly at her, his attention pulled sideways toward one of his officers who was now speaking in a lower voice, confusion evident in the way he gestured toward his device, as if the information he was receiving did not match what he expected to see. And Hayes took a step toward him, listening, his jaw tightening slightly, and for the first time since the lights had come on, he did not immediately return to Naomi with a command. Instead, he paused, absorbing, recalculating. And Naomi watched that moment carefully, not with satisfaction, not with anger, but with clarity, because this was the exact point where power stopped being absolute and started being questioned, and it did not require force, it required truth, documented, undeniable, and she spoke quietly into the phone again, her voice steady. Are they seeing it? And the answer came without hesitation. All units are being monitored in real time. And Naomi nodded once, almost imperceptibly, and outside, the formation continued to loosen, not dramatically, not enough for anyone to admit it out loud, but enough that the air no longer felt closed, no longer felt like it was pressing inward. And Hayes turned back toward her, his expression controlled but no longer untouched, his voice lower now, more deliberate. "Ma'am, we need to clear this up," he said, and Naomi met his gaze again, her eyes calm, unwavering, and she answered simply, "That is already happening." And the words did not challenge him, they did not provoke, they simply existed. And that was what made them impossible to ignore. And the radios continued, voices overlapping, instructions shifting, and somewhere in that layered noise, authority was no longer coming from the ground, it was coming from above, and everyone there could feel it, even if no one had said it yet. For a moment, everything slowed, not the kind of silence that comes from emptiness, but the kind that settles when too many things are happening at once and the mind cannot keep up. And Naomi Carter felt it in the subtle shift of her own breathing, in the way the tightness in her chest loosened just enough to let her think clearly, not react, not anticipate, just exist inside the moment as it unfolded around her. And the flashing lights outside her windshield no longer felt like pressure. They felt distant, like reflections on water rather than something closing in, and she lowered the phone slightly, not ending the call, just letting it rest against her shoulder again. The quiet presence on the other end still there, still listening, still recording every second without interruption, and her gaze drifted briefly to the side window, where the glow of a streetlight softened the edges of the scene, turning uniforms into silhouettes, turning movement into something almost abstract, and she could see one officer standing slightly apart from the others now, his posture no longer aligned with the group, his attention divided between his radio and the unfolding uncertainty around him. And it reminded her of something, not this exact moment, but a feeling she had carried for years, the awareness that systems only looked solid from the outside, that inside them, there were always fractures, always moments where certainty gave way to doubt, and her fingers traced the edge of the steering wheel again, slow, deliberate, grounding, and she let her eyes close for just a second longer this time, not to escape, but to breathe through everything that had led her here, the long nights, the quiet decisions, the moments when speaking up had felt impossible and yet necessary. And when she opened them again, the scene had not changed dramatically, but it had shifted in weight, in tone, in direction, and Officer Hayes was no longer the center of motion. He was listening now, his head tilted slightly as his radio carried instructions that were no longer his to give, and his shoulders, still squared, carried a different kind of tension, not authority, but awareness. And Naomi watched him without judgment, without satisfaction, just observation, because this was not about him, not entirely. It was about something larger, something that moved through people, through roles, through moments like this one. And her phone vibrated softly again, the voice returning with calm precision. "Review board is engaged," it said, and Naomi nodded once, her expression unchanged, but something inside her settled more deeply, like a weight she had been carrying had finally found a place to rest. And outside, one of the patrol cars dimmed its headlights slightly, not fully, just enough to change the brightness across her dashboard, and another officer took a step back, creating space where there had been none before, and the circle that had once felt tight and absolute now felt open, incomplete, no longer a barrier but a formation waiting for direction. And Naomi leaned back slightly into her seat, her posture relaxed but not careless, present but not tense, and she spoke quietly